Crash and burn.
Hey everybody. So tonight I am looking to discuss the second episode of the first season of Millennium, and that is Gehenna. I mean, what a way for a show to start. The first episode, the pilot's about that dude, what is it, La Peste, or whatever the fuck it is, the guy that's abducting male prostitutes and then like sewing their eyes and mouths shut and putting them in these like plywood coffins and burying them all over random public parks. And the 9 Inch Nails, they used that too. I think it was it Closer was in that? I can't remember. And that was the pilot of the show. Like, this show is bleak and ugly. And the pilot was ugly enough. And then this, what a hell of a way to open up the second episode. Like, I can't believe that the show ever really made it to air. It's uncanny, the topics the show covered. So this is about a doomsday cult that's led by a dude by the name of Ricardo Clement. He was I believe originally some sort of like chemical engineer of some kind who was working for some firm, and he'd started this doomsday cult, and there was a bunch of biological weapons that they find that the cult was storing away. Well, anyways, this Ricardo Clement dude, as it turns out, he might not be human, because when he's apprehended at the end of the episode, Frank's partner, Peter, he's like, we're not getting anything out of him. Like, we have no idea who this guy is, you know? And they seem to know his name, and that's about it. And Frank's like, I think I know who he is. And then the dude, Ricardo, senses that Frank is looking at him through the two-way glass in the interrogation room at the police station. And he stands up and looks right at Frank through the glass. And Frank's like, oh, fuck. He's like, I gotta get out of here. Because the guy was either literally Satan himself, or it was a demon associated with Satan. And what this demon was doing is it was running a doomsday cult of people who were trying to sell hair care products. Like, everybody was Bob Smith. Hello, this is Bob Smith. And I was wondering, do you care about your hair's health? And any of the cult members that step out of line, they get them high on LSD, drive them around, get them listening to a lot of Cypress Hill. And then they dump them at these old abandoned factories where Clement, wearing who has a flamethrower, he incinerates them till there's nothing left. That's how the episode opens up, is a local flower club that goes up to like a certain public park and will plant flowers there. They've been noticing more and more ash has been being dumped there. And then what inevitably happens is they find an ear, which should have been incinerated, but for whatever reason it didn't survive. I mean, it survived, sorry. And that's how Frank Black becomes active with this case. And the tone of this episode is horrid. The tone of this entire show is absolutely off-putting. Everything about this show, aside from the fact that the show is absolutely perfect, it's amazingly well written. It's incredibly well acted, and it's paced so well, and it is so many memorable characters. This is the show that gave birth to Lucy Butler. For anybody that remembers her, she was a wonderful demon. I'm not sure what demon she was exactly, but her arc in the show is my favorite thing. And this episode is just so bleak and so ugly, and it's so unforgiving. So they hop these kids up on LSD, and then they set Ricardo Clement loose on them with a fucking flamethrower. And he's watching from above all the time, like when they drop the drugged dude off at the abandoned factories and they just kind of leave him there. You see Clement from way above, like at the top of the abandoned factory, like from the ceiling, which then again suggests that he's not human, because there's no way a human could get up there without some kind of cherry picker or some shit, right? So that's this show. The tone is so heavy. I mean, everything about this, the opening of the show, it opens up with the quote from Auden's poem, Blessed Event. It says, what is it? I smell blood and an age of prominent madmen. And that's how this opens. Do you know what I mean? This couldn't be uglier, because it's really fitting too that this is about a doomsday cult that was attempting to use biological warfare in order to wipe out tons of people. Because a couple of years prior, when was this episode released? I have it written down. Yeah, this episode was released in November '96, and there was the sarin attack on the Tokyo subway system in March of 1995, I believe, by the Om Shinriko cult. A bunch of fucking lunatics that were trying to force the end. And so this is very timely, especially, well, I mean, not so much anymore, but decades ago when this was being aired. Like I said, everybody, like, I remember the Tokyo sarin attacks. Like, I remember them like they were yesterday. I think there were like 640 victims, give or take. And it was scary as hell because they unleashed sarin. Like, Jesus Christ. And so it was good of the show to sort of keep a focus on those sort of things, but then that was the problem with this show, was the show was just so bleak and it was so ugly, and it was always dealing with things that mirrored the ugliness of reality, and it did such a good job of driving home the blackness of it all, that the show didn't last 4 seasons. They got word at the end of the 2nd season that the show was going to be shut down after the 3rd season. So the show that was named after and supposed to be about some big cataclysmic event was supposed to take place at the Millennium, the show didn't make it. And I know why. And it's just because we already had the X-Files, which was another Chris Carter vehicle that was doing incredibly well. But that show was ugly enough. By the time 97 rolled around, that's season 3 to 5 of the X-Files. I think of season 4 specifically, and season 4 had Home, the episode, like, which is quite possibly the most disgusting episode of the X-Files, possibly, about the inbreds. And so you had the X-Files being bleak enough, and then you had Chris Carter dumping this show on an unsuspecting public. And everything about this just says stay away, unless you're a huge fan of horror and things like that, in which case this show will draw you in. But despite the fact that I love the show, and I've loved the show for decades, I can understand why the show didn't last. Everything about this is just hideous. The show always takes like a ray of light and tosses it into the abyss. Like these people planting flowers up at this local park. That's really nice. That's really cute. And of course, there's a fucking doomsday cult dumping burned bodies and ash and shit there. Because naturally, much like the Yellow House, Frank and Catherine's Yellow House, it's always seen as sort of a beacon of positivity, a beacon of hope in this otherwise hideous world. But even that doesn't matter, because Bob Bletcher, Frank's old friend, he ends up being murdered by Lucy Butler in the Yellow House on Ezekiel. So it's like the show will set up something positive just to like annihilate it over and over again. And this is only the 2nd episode of the show. This show really doesn't have any duds until the 3rd season. I felt the 3rd season was really uneven. And the 2nd season did have the lore-heavy episodes, the Owls and Roosters. I think that was in the 2nd season at least, which, considering that the show wasn't going to last, there's no point in getting into the lore of the Millennium Group and how there's 2 separate factions within the Millennium Group attempting to seize power and vying for control and blah, blah, blah. It feels sort of like wasted looking back because the show didn't last. But I think that's where I'm going to leave it. If you haven't checked out Millennium, check out Millennium. This show is dripping with terror and dread, and it's just, some episodes you almost feel like you need a shower afterwards. This episode is one of them. Like, that fucking death cult was so scary, and you don't even really see a lot of it. It's the writers did such a good job of conveying the sense of annihilation that you can feel it with, like I said, such little contact with them. But that's where I think I'm going to leave it. So like I said, this show is amazing. You guys have to check this out. If you haven't checked out Millennium, starring Lance Henriksen from way back, you should, because this show, the first couple seasons were amazing. And that's where I'm going to leave it. So like always, thank you so much for hanging out with me for a little over 9 minutes while I discussed this old episode from this obscure 1990s TV show. You guys are amazing. I'm getting out of here. Have a good night.